Recently, there has been a rising in demon attacks against the 5 alternate members of the Lex Luthor's squadron, the squadron that was made to take out the Justice Demons and other demon commanders. You see, it seems that the demons who we have fought against for multiple years now have spent much of their energy, most of it in fact, in creating demons personalised to the fears of these hunters, so to take them out of commission so that we have less chance of beating the demons. The first demon they created was a demon for Levi Kiaru. Now, Levi, at a very young age, had gone fishing with his father and sister. Whilst they were out at sea, his sister fell off the boat. He jumped in after her to try and help her. His father tried to help them as well, and eventually ended up trying to call the police, as they were drifted out to the middle of the lake with no one able to get to them. Eventually, his sister unfortunately drowned and passed away, and he was saved. But that experience horrified him. The feeling of all the fish rubbing against his feet, crawling all around him, still cursed him to this day. He had started living on a beach to try and recover using exposure therapy, but for a while it hadn't really been working. This attack happened on the one day he had tried and get over his fear by going for the first time into the ocean for a swim. This was a grave error. As soon as he was sent in, he was dragged off, not by a wave or by the ocean's currents, but by a wave of fish at his legs and arms, swimming all around him. And then he saw the demon, a massive sea serpent with a horrific face and mouth, able to likely eat him in one gulp. Fish like spines coming out of him, spines like pufferfish. He swam all around him. Levi tried fighting him off, and it worked for a while, but he kept just getting pulled away, and any time he tried to swim away, the fish had just pulled him closer. Eventually, after an entire hour of this, he did manage to escape, and he realised that if a demon was personalised and made to come for him, there may be demons coming for the rest of the squadron. That's exactly what happened, and luckily, when Levi realised, he was able to go to the other members and help them fight against their demons, fitted for their specific phobias. Darren Lurak was another member of the squadron, and his phobia may seem irrational, but that is exactly why it plagued him for so long. See, Darren had banana phobia, the often described irrational fear of bananas. However, it was quite obvious to see why he had such a fear. At a very young age, his father abandoned him with his mother, so they had to live alone. Then one day, his mother died, choked on a banana, with Darren too young to realise what was happening and unable to save his mother. He was sent into the foster system, and even worse, when he was sent back into schooling and told kids about what had happened, he was mocked. The children were so young, they didn't realise how much it had pained him. Due to how ridiculous it sounded, no matter how much pain Darren said it caused, the children never believed him, making it even worse as he could never even talk about the fears that plagued him. Not even to his teachers, who even then didn't believe him. He grew up in the foster system and never found a family that fit for him. When he was 18, he got a job that paid very little and tried to avoid the very fruit that killed his mother at any costs. However, this demon was made to make him face it. The demon itself appeared like a large serpent with the skin of a banana peeled back around his face where his mouth and head was. See, when this demon attacked him in the inner city where he lived, it attacked him in his apartment. He was coming out from his bed early in the morning when he felt the demon wrap around his legs, lift him up and start to wrap around him, coiling around him like a boa. forcing its body to peel back and shoveling masses of the terrifying fruit down his throat. Darren cried and screamed in pain, but for hours he couldn't do anything. And, unfortunately, Levi hadn't reached him in time. By the time Levi had gotten into his apartment and pulled out a gun to kill the banana phobia demon, Darren had already had one of his arms torn off as he was wrapped together, and traumatized by the event. As his mouth foamed with blood and the banana skin, he could barely move, shaking, traumatized. Levi stayed there for another half hour trying to see if he was okay, but after a while decided he'd need to leave. He took Darren with him to try and help him, but unfortunately, for a while, he was too traumatized to do anything. Bruce Hutcherson was an interesting case. Unlike the rest of the squadron besides Lex, he had overcome his phobia nearly 20 years ago. See, as a child, like many children are, he was made fun of for his weight and size, called many names that, obviously, most people wouldn't want to hear. He gained intense obesophobia and almost starved himself as he tried to get slim. Luckily, in the modern day, he has managed to do so. However, his fears of becoming fat again do not plague him as they once did. However, this demon needed to get crafty and different in its tactics if it wanted to frighten him, as obviously, the tactics that worked for all the others likely wouldn't work for Bruce. So the demon had 4 tentacles that, when they stabbed into him, reverted his mind to that of his 12-year-old self. Panicked as the tentacles wrapped around his arms, the demon, which had once appeared as a frail man, began growing in size, and part of it shifted through the tentacles into Bruce. Bruce, filled in fear, getting flashes of what his classmates and other school kids would say to him, tried to fight back against the demon, but wasn't doing so well. Luckily, he was at least doing slightly better than the others had done. However, Bruce was still fighting back very poorly. Luckily, Darren and Levi soon arrived, and was able to help him fight against his demon. It was definitely the toughest demon overall to fight, but luckily it left no lasting damage on Bruce. By this time, Darren had almost entirely gotten over the experience, but he still had almost entirely regained his fear that he had become so close to overcoming recently. However, though, they needed to press forward, as the other members of the squadron may have been being attacked at the very same time they were thinking about this. Luckily for them, they weren't. The other 2 had already overcome their demons. Lacey Blakes had intense rhinidophobia for a long time. Luckily, she had recently overcome it. Not enough for the demon to not do intense damage to her, however. And see, when she had grown up, her father had been obsessed with being clean. Scared out of his mind of germs, he cleaned every surface, and unfortunately passed on that fear onto Lacey. However, not in a specific way. She wasn't afraid of germs as such, as she had grown up around other people as well that had helped push her out of it. But there was one part of her father's fear that she could never shake. And see, where she lived, there was a woodland nearby, filled with frogs. One of the days, one of the members of her class had brought in a frog for show and tell, and she was terrified of it. Looking at it, seeing how the slimy creature simply moved around, and how the slime spilled off of it, she was disgusted how nature would let something be so dirty. She became intensely afraid of frogs, seeing them as moving germs around her, trying to avoid them at all costs, never going into the woods around her house. Unfortunately, however, her demon would know the best way to torture her out of all of them. You see, as she was running a bath for herself, the water wasn't coming. As she pulled the tap harder, it started to run, but not water. Frog spawn and even live frogs somehow mind-twistingly came out of the tap. Spraying out, she screamed out, but the door had somehow locked behind her. Luckily, thanks to her experience hunting demons, she was able to bust it open. But as she walked out, her momentum continued, pulling her up into the air, from the tongue coming out of the mouth of a giant frog demon. Frogs came out of the demon's nostrils, eyes, and mouth, and they all covered her, spilling the slime across her. She tried fighting back, grabbing a knife from her kitchen and stabbing the demon, which promptly let her go. But there was nowhere for her to go. Her door was locked, but before she could break it open to try and leave, the demon grabbed her again by a mouth at the end of its tongue, grabbing onto her arm and pulling her towards it. It leapt at her, trying to swallow her whole. Luckily, she managed to fight back against the demon, even as the slime became acidic and the lights began to flicker so she couldn't see anything. She managed to use the knife to plunge it through the demon's head, killing it. Lara Trenair, at a very young age, had watched a movie about someone being buried alive. Now, this is obviously what became her fear. However, unfortunately, she did not fully win against her demon. Yes, she managed to kill it, but something unfortunate happened because of that. At a very young age, she'd seen a horror movie about someone getting buried alive, and that stuck with her forever, and she gained the fear of that for the rest of her life. And that was when she, living near a graveyard in a small village, although that being the only place she never visited, was attacked by a demon. A large mole-like demon with exposed bones and arms reaching out from its fur as if trying to claw itself out of a grave, attacked her with a shovel-like tail. Like a star-nosed mole, it had multiple tendrils coming from its nose. However, each one had a mouth on the end that paralysed her, covering her in electric shocks that made it so that she wasn't able to move. And then the demon carried her off towards a graveyard. However, it actually carried her into her own back garden, although I wasn't wrong when I said it was a graveyard. As it began digging a hole, chunks of dirt simply being moved as the demon clawed its hands into her as it tried to pull her deeper. And she felt herself being pulled into the demon's fur, almost like an extra grave. She hit something. Another grave in her garden. She didn't know it was there, and neither did the demon. Luckily, she was able to use this to finally be able to move again as it jolted the electricity out of her. She grabbed the demon and a piece of wood from the coffin and was able to kill it after a long battle. The demon did die, however, she can't rejoin the squadron. The squadron is being reassembled in case Justice Demons or any other demon commanders come back, but she won't be allowed to join in case it was her who put the coffin there. I hope it's not, and I believe it isn't, but she's under investigation and will not be able to join the squadron again until it's over.